Every failed supercar maker that deserved better explained. Dome, the Japanese dreamers who couldn't get legal. Picture this, you're at the 1978 Geneva Motor Show, and suddenly you see what looks like a spaceship that somehow learned to drive. That was the Dome Zero, and it should have been Japan's first true supercar. Instead, it became one of the most heartbreaking what-ifs in automotive history. Dome was founded by Minoru Hayashi, a man with two simple dreams: race at Le Mans and build a road car version of his racing machines. The Zero was his masterpiece. A wedge-shaped missile that looked like it had been designed by aliens who really understood aerodynamics. The car was powered by a 2.0-liter inline-4 engine producing around 145 horsepower, which might not sound like much today, but in 1978, wrapped in a body that weighed just 850 kilograms, it was serious performance. The Zero could hit 180 miles per hour and looked like it was doing that speed even when parked. But here's where the dream died. Dome couldn't get the Zero certified for Japanese roads. The safety regulations were too strict, the emissions requirements too demanding, and the company simply didn't have the resources to navigate the bureaucratic maze. After spending years developing what could have been Japan's answer to the Lamborghini Countach, they had to watch it remain forever a prototype. The tragedy deepened with the Giotto Caspita in the 1990s. This was Hayashi's second attempt at supercar glory, a sleek, low-slung machine that looked like it could slice through the air like a knife. Originally designed around a Subaru Flat 12 engine, it was later re-engineered with the Judd V10 producing over 450 horsepower. The Caspita was even more advanced than the Zero, featuring sophisticated aerodynamics and a design that predicted the direction supercars would take in the 2000s. But once again, Dome couldn't make the transition from prototype to production. The company lacked the financial resources and manufacturing infrastructure to build cars in meaningful numbers. Today, Dome exists primarily as a racing constructor, building cars for Super GT and other Japanese racing series. But car enthusiasts remember them for what they almost achieved, proving that Japan could build supercars as beautiful and advanced as anything from Europe. Lister, the British bruisers who ran out of steam. Lister Storm wasn't just a car, it was a statement of intent from a small British company that refused to believe supercars had to be civilized. This was a machine that took the massive 7-liter V12 from Jaguar's Le Mans winning XJ R9 race car and somehow squeezed it into a road car that could theoretically seat 4 people. The Storm was the brainchild of Lawrence Pierce, who had acquired the rights to the Lister name and wanted to revive the company's racing heritage. The original Lister cars of the 1950s had been known for their brutal power and uncompromising approach to performance, and the Storm carried on that tradition. Under the hood sat that magnificent Jaguar, V12 producing around 546 horsepower in road trim. This wasn't just any V12, it was a race-bred engine that had dominated endurance racing, now tamed just enough to be street legal. The sound it made was absolutely intoxicating, a deep rumble that could be heard from miles away. The Storm's design was purposeful rather than pretty, with aggressive aerodynamics and a low, wide stance that screamed speed. The car featured a carbon fiber body mounted on a steel space frame chassis, combining lightness with strength. Despite being technically a 4-seater, the rear seats were really only suitable for small children or very good friends. On the track, the Storm was devastating. The race version competed in various GT championships and even tackled Le Mans, proving that the basic design was sound. The road car could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.1 seconds and reach a top speed of over 200 miles per hour. But Lister's ambitions exceeded their resources. Building the Storm required enormous investment in tooling and development, and the company struggled to find enough customers willing to pay the car's £220,000 price tag. Only 4 road cars were ever built before financial reality forced Lister to abandon the project. The Storm represented everything that was both exciting and problematic about small British supercar manufacturers. They had the engineering talent and racing heritage to build incredible machines, but they lacked the financial resources and manufacturing infrastructure to compete with established brands. Cizeta, the Lamborghini rebels who doubled down. When ex-Lamborghini employee Claudio Zampoli teamed up with music producer Giorgio Moroder in the late 1980s, they had one goal: build a supercar that would make Lamborghini look conservative. The result was Cizeta and their V16T, a car that literally doubled down on everything. While most supercars of the era used V8s, V10s, or V12s, Cizeta said, "Hold my espresso," and built a massive V16 engine. This wasn't just any V16, it was essentially 2 Lamborghini Arauco engines joined together, creating one of the most audacious power plants ever conceived. The V16T produced 540 horsepower and could hit 200 miles per hour, while accelerating to 60 miles per hour in just 4 seconds. Impressive numbers for 1991. The car's design was clearly influenced by the Lamborghini Diablo, which made sense since some of the same people worked on both projects. But the V16T's complexity was also its downfall. The massive engine was incredibly difficult to manufacture and maintain, requiring specialized knowledge that few mechanics possessed. The car's $650,000 price tag put it in direct competition with established supercars that offered better reliability and dealer support. Only 10 V16Ts were produced between 1991 and 1995, making it rarer than most Ferraris. The company technically still exists and claims cars can be built to order, but no new vehicles have been produced in decades. The V16T remains a fascinating footnote in supercar history, proof that sometimes more really is too much. Vector, the American aerospace dream that crashed to Earth. Gerald Wiegert had a vision that was either brilliant or completely insane: take aerospace technology and apply it to building the ultimate American supercar. The result was Vector, a company that produced some of the most extreme and controversial supercars ever built. The Vector W8 looked like it had been designed by someone who thought the Lamborghini Countach wasn't dramatic enough. Every surface was sharp and angular, with a cockpit that resembled a fighter jet more than a car. The interior featured aircraft-style switches and gauges, reinforcing the aerospace theme that Wiegert was obsessed with. Under the hood was a twin-turbocharged 6-liter V8 producing 625 horsepower, enormous for 1989. The engine was based on a Chevrolet small block, but heavily modified with turbochargers, intercoolers, and sophisticated engine management. Vector claimed the W8 could reach 242 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest cars in the world. But the W8's problems were as extreme as its performance. The car was incredibly complex, with systems that were more suited to aircraft than automobiles. Reliability was poor, with frequent breakdowns and component failures. The cooling system struggled to manage the heat generated by the twin-turbo engine, leading to constant overheating problems. Build quality was inconsistent at best. Each car was essentially hand-built, but Vector lacked the expertise and infrastructure of established supercar manufacturers. Panel gaps were uneven, electrical systems were unreliable, and many components were sourced from unlikely places. The situation got even worse with the M12, which came after Wiegert was fired in a hostile takeover by Megatech. The M12 was heavily based on the Lamborghini Diablo. Megatech owned Lamborghini too, but somehow managed to be worse than both the W8 and the Diablo. It was heavier, less reliable, and universally hated by automotive journalists. Only 22 W8s and 14 M12s were ever built before Vector collapsed. The company that was supposed to establish America as a supercar powerhouse instead became a cautionary tale about the importance of engineering discipline and business planning. Consulier/Mosler, the bond trader's speed obsession. Warren Mosler was a successful bond trader who decided to build the ultimate track weapon. Unlike other supercar manufacturers who focused on luxury and prestige, Mosler was obsessed with pure performance. The result was the Consulier GTP, a car that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought aesthetics were for weaklings. The GTP was literally the first production car with no structural metal, just a fiberglass monocoque chassis weighing only 2,200 pounds. This was revolutionary for 1987, predating the carbon fiber construction that would become standard in supercars decades later. Powered by a Chrysler 2.2-liter turbo engine producing around 190 horsepower, the GTP didn't sound impressive on paper, but with its featherweight construction, it could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 5 seconds, and run a 13.9-second quarter mile. Serious performance for the late 1980s. The GTP was so fast it was banned from IMSA racing in 1991 for being too dominant. Mosler was so confident in his car's performance that he offered a $100,000 bounty to anyone who could beat it on any American track. Car and driver took him up on the challenge, but used a compromised test car with bad brakes and electrical problems, leading to a controversial victory that Mosler refused to pay for. Despite its incredible performance, the GTP was a commercial disaster. The car was absolutely hideous. Even car and driver called it about as ugly as a car can get. The interior was Spartan, the ride was harsh, and the overall experience was more like driving a race car than a road car. Mosler later evolved the company into Mosler Automotive, producing the MT900 and MT900S. These cars were much better looking and even faster, but they suffered from the same problems: tiny production numbers, limited dealer support, and a focus on performance over refinement. The company finally collapsed in 2013 after building fewer than 100 cars total. Bizzarrini, the Ferrari rebel who burned too bright. Giotto Bizzarrini was one of the most talented engineers of his generation, a man who helped create the Ferrari 250 GTO before leaving to start his own company. For 5 brief years in the 1960s, Bizzarrini produced some of the most beautiful and advanced sports cars ever built. The Bizzarrini Strada 5300 was the company's masterpiece, a stunning GT car that shared its basic design with the Iso Grifo. But where the Grifo was refined and luxurious, the Strada was raw and purposeful. Every line was optimized for performance, creating a car that looked like it was moving even when standing still. Under the long hood sat a Chevrolet 327 small block V8, producing around 365 horsepower. This might seem like an odd choice for an Italian exotic, but Bizzarrini understood that American V8s offered the perfect combination of power, reliability, and affordability. The engine was mounted low and far back in the chassis, creating perfect weight distribution. The Strada's handling was legendary among those lucky enough to drive one. Bizzarrini had learned from his time at Ferrari, creating a chassis that was both incredibly stiff and beautifully balanced. The car could corner at speeds that would terrify drivers of contemporary supercars. But Bizzarrini's perfectionism was also his downfall. He spent enormous amounts of time and money developing each car, often rebuilding components multiple times until they met his exacting standards. This attention to detail created incredible machines, but it also made them impossibly expensive to produce. The company also suffered from Bizzarrini's difficult personality. He was a brilliant engineer, but a poor businessman, often alienating customers and suppliers with his uncompromising approach. When financial problems mounted in the late 1960s, there was no one willing to bail out the company. Bizzarrini filed for bankruptcy in 1969 after building fewer than 200 cars. The man who had helped create the 250 GTO was forced to watch his own company collapse, taking with it some of the most advanced sports cars of the era. DuPont, the chemical dynasty's automotive dreams. The famous chemical company family tried their hand at luxury automobiles from 1919 to 1931, creating some of America's most elegant and exclusive cars. E. Paul DuPont used his family's massive wealth to hire the finest engineering talent and create automobiles that could compete with the best European luxury cars. DuPont automobiles were hand-built in small numbers, with each car representing the pinnacle of American craftsmanship. The Model G, introduced in 1928, featured a 5.3-liter straight-8 engine producing 125 horsepower, serious performance for its era. The cars were known for their exceptional build quality and attention to detail. Only about 600 DuPont automobiles were ever produced, competing directly with Packard, Cadillac, and even Duesenberg. The cars were compared favorably to the finest European luxury automobiles, proving that American manufacturers could build cars that rivaled anything from Europe. But the Great Depression killed demand for ultra-luxury automobiles. The company went bankrupt in 1932, when E. Paul DuPont shifted his focus to purchasing the Indian Motorcycle Company. The DuPont name disappeared from the automotive world, leaving behind only a few hundred examples of what American luxury could achieve. Yamaha, the musical instrument maker's racing dream. Most people know Yamaha for motorcycles, pianos, and sound equipment, but in the early 1990s, the Japanese company had much bigger ambitions. The OX9911 was supposed to be their entry into the supercar market, a Formula One-inspired machine that would showcase their engineering capabilities. The OX9911 was designed around Yamaha's experience as an engine supplier to Formula One teams. The car featured a 3.5-liter V12 engine that was directly derived from their F1 power plant, producing around 400 horsepower. This was serious performance for 1992. Wrapped in a package that looked like a road-going race car, the design was absolutely wild, with tandem seating that put the passenger directly behind the driver. This configuration was borrowed from fighter jets and racing cars, creating an incredibly narrow cockpit that looked like nothing else on the road. The body was sculpted for maximum aerodynamic efficiency, with every surface optimized for airflow. The chassis was equally advanced, featuring a carbon fiber monocoque that was both incredibly light and incredibly strong. The suspension was derived from Formula One technology, with pushrod-operated dampers and sophisticated geometry. The OX9911 was essentially a Formula One car with a roof and license plates. Yamaha built 3 prototypes and had ambitious plans for limited production. The car was supposed to showcase their engineering capabilities and establish them as a serious player in the automotive world. The OX9911 represented everything Yamaha stood for: precision engineering, advanced technology, and uncompromising performance. But the project was killed by a combination of factors. The Japanese economy was entering a recession, making it difficult to justify expensive development projects. The supercar market was also becoming increasingly crowded, with established manufacturers like Ferrari and Lamborghini dominating sales. More importantly, Yamaha realized that building cars was very different from building motorcycles or musical instruments. The automotive industry required massive investments in manufacturing infrastructure, dealer networks, and customer service, resources that Yamaha wasn't prepared to commit. The OX9911 prototypes still exist today, occasionally appearing at car shows as reminders of what might have been. They represent one of the most advanced supercars of the early 1990s, a machine that was ahead of its time but never got the chance to prove itself in the marketplace. Venturi, the French innovators who couldn't find their market. Venturi was supposed to be France's answer to Ferrari and Porsche, a company that would combine Gallic flair with cutting-edge technology. For a brief period in the 1990s, they produced some genuinely impressive supercars that showcased French engineering at its finest. The Venturi 300 Atlantique was the company's masterpiece, a mid-engine coupe powered by a turbocharged PRV V6 engine. This engine was jointly developed by Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo, and in Venturi's hands, it produced around 310 horsepower. The car could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 4.7 seconds and reach a top speed of 171 miles per hour. What made the Atlantique special wasn't just its performance, it was its sophistication. The car featured advanced aerodynamics, sophisticated suspension, and build quality that rivaled much more expensive supercars. The interior was beautifully crafted, with leather and carbon fiber creating a cabin that was both luxurious and purposeful. Venturi also produced the 400 GT, a more track-focused variant that competed in the BPR Global GT series against the likes of the Ferrari F40 GTE and Porsche 911 GT2. The 400 GT proved that Venturi could build cars that were competitive with the best in the world, both on the road and on the track. But Venturi's problem was finding customers. The company was caught between two worlds, too expensive to compete with mainstream sports cars, but not prestigious enough to challenge established supercar brands. French cars also had a reputation for electrical problems and quirky reliability, which scared away potential buyers. The company struggled financially throughout the 1990s, changing ownership multiple times as various investors tried to make the business work. Each change in ownership brought new uncertainty and disrupted development programs. Venturi eventually abandoned road car production and focused on electric vehicles and Formula E racing. The company still exists today, but in a very different form than the supercar manufacturer of the 1990s. The Atlantique and 400 GT remain as reminders of what French engineering could achieve when given the freedom to innovate. Caparo, the Formula One Dream Team. Founded by engineers who previously worked on the McLaren F1, Caparo Vehicle Technologies wanted to create the closest thing to a road-legal Formula One car. The T1 was their masterpiece. a 575 horsepower, 1,000-pound carbon fiber missile that could generate 1,500 pounds of downforce at 150 miles per hour. The T1 was powered by a 3.5-liter V8 that revved to over 10,000 RPM, producing an intoxicating sound that was pure Formula One. The car featured F1-style aerodynamics, pushrod suspension, and a carbon fiber monocoque chassis that was both incredibly light and incredibly strong. The T1 absolutely destroyed every lap time record at Top Gear's test track, proving that the engineering was sound. The car could pull upwards of 3G in corners and accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 2.5 seconds. It was essentially a Formula One car with license plates. But the T1 was almost too extreme for its own good. The car was plagued with reliability issues, including the floor literally falling off during Top Gear filming. The driving experience was so intense that it was genuinely frightening for most drivers. The car required constant maintenance and specialized knowledge to keep running. Caparo planned to produce around 25 cars per year, but they only managed to sell 15 to 16 examples before the company collapsed in 2015. The project ended tragically with the suicide of company owner Tony Drayson, bringing an end to one of the most ambitious supercar projects ever attempted. Marussia, Russia's supercar ambitions. Russia's first and only supercar manufacturer, Marussia produced the B1 and B2 from 2008 until the company's collapse. Founded in 2007, Marussia was supposed to establish Russia as a player in the global supercar market. The B1 looked like a terrible Lamborghini knockoff with awkward proportions and styling that seemed to miss the mark entirely. The B2 was much more attractive and unique, featuring clean lines and a distinctive design that actually looked like a proper supercar. Both cars shared the same Cosworth V6 engine producing between 360 to 420 horsepower, mounted in an aluminum and carbon fiber chassis. The cars were designed to focus on weight and handling over raw power, with the B1 weighing around 2,400 pounds. Marussia also competed in Formula One from 2012 to 2014, using their racing program to develop technology for their road cars. The company had ambitious plans for expansion and even considered building cars in other markets. But the combination of economic sanctions, the collapse of the Russian economy, and poor sales forced Marussia to shut down both their road car and Formula One operations. The company produced fewer than 500 cars total before disappearing from the automotive landscape. DeLorean, the stainless steel dream that became a nightmare. John DeLorean's DMC-12 is famous for Back to the Future, but it was a commercial disaster that destroyed its creator's reputation. The car's unique stainless steel body and gull-wing doors couldn't overcome its fundamental problems. The DMC-12 was originally supposed to be powered by a rotary engine, but development problems forced DeLorean to switch to a Peugeot V6, producing only 130 horsepower for the US market. This was woefully inadequate for a car that looked so exotic and cost so much money. The car's handling was poor, with heavy steering and unpredictable dynamics. The build quality was inconsistent, with panel gaps, electrical problems, and mechanical issues plaguing most examples. The gull-wing doors looked dramatic but were heavy and prone to problems. About 9,000 DMC-12s were built before the company collapsed amid financial scandal and John DeLorean's arrest on drug trafficking charges. The car that was supposed to revolutionize the automotive industry instead became a cautionary tale about the importance of proper engineering and business planning. Aixam, the microcar maker's mega dream. Aixam was known for building tiny microcars that barely qualified as automobiles, so once they announced plans for a massive Mercedes V12-powered crossover, the automotive world thought it was a joke. The Megatrack wasn't a joke, it was one of the most audacious vehicles ever conceived. The Megatrack was enormous, measuring over 16 feet long and 7 feet wide. It rode on massive tires and featured ground clearance that would make a military vehicle jealous. But this wasn't just a big truck. It was powered by a 6.0-liter Mercedes V12 engine producing around 400 horsepower. The design was absolutely wild, combining the proportions of a military vehicle with the luxury of a high-end SUV. The interior featured leather seats, air conditioning, and all the amenities you'd expect from a luxury vehicle, but it also had the capability to climb mountains and ford rivers. Aixam positioned the Megatrack as the ultimate adventure vehicle, something that could take wealthy customers anywhere they wanted to go in complete comfort. The company envisioned customers using it for everything from African safaris to Arctic expeditions. But the Megatrack's size and complexity made it incredibly expensive to build. Each vehicle required enormous amounts of hand labor, and the specialized components were costly to source. The company struggled to find customers willing to pay the car's astronomical price tag. The Megatrack remained a fascinating one-off, proving that even microcar manufacturers could dream big. Nobody knows exactly how many Megatracks were built, but it was certainly fewer than 10. The project was quietly abandoned as Aixam returned to building sensible microcars for the European market. Lotec, the German mystery makers. Lotec remains one of the most mysterious supercar manufacturers ever, a company that built some of the most extreme machines imaginable while maintaining almost complete secrecy about their operations. The C1000 was their masterpiece, a car that looked like a Pagani Zonda designed during the Reagan administration. The C1000 was commissioned by a wealthy businessman from the United Arab Emirates who wanted the fastest car in the world. Lotec delivered exactly that, creating a machine with a 5.6-liter Mercedes V8 engine producing 1,000 horsepower. The car weighed just 2,381 pounds, giving it a power-to-weight ratio that was almost incomprehensible for 1995. The design was wild even by supercar standards, with aggressive aerodynamics and a body that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of carbon fiber. The C1000 could supposedly reach 268 miles per hour, making it faster than the McLaren F1 that wouldn't achieve its top speed record until 3 years later. But the C1000 was a one-off, built specifically for that single customer. Lotec continued building occasional supercars over the years, but they remained a mystery to most of the automotive world. The company operated more like a high-end custom shop than a traditional manufacturer, building cars for wealthy clients who valued exclusivity above all else. Lotec's approach was the opposite of most supercar manufacturers. While companies like Ferrari and Lamborghini sought publicity and brand recognition, Lotec preferred to work in the shadows, creating incredible machines for customers who didn't want attention. This secrecy made them fascinating to enthusiasts, but impossible to sustain as a business. Izdera, the Mercedes rebel who dreamed too big. Eberhard Schultz was an ex-Porsche engineer who left Stuttgart with a vision: create the ultimate Mercedes-powered supercar. His company, Izdera, produced some of the most beautiful and advanced supercars of the 1980s and 1990s, but they were always too ambitious for their own good. The story began when Schultz partnered with Mercedes-Benz to design the CW311 concept, a gorgeous forward-thinking mid-engined coupe with gull-wing doors that harkened back to the Silver Arrow's past. When Mercedes decided not to produce the CW311, Schultz decided to do it himself under the Izdera name. The Imperator 1080 was the result, a stunning supercar powered by Mercedes engines ranging from 5 to 6 liters. The car featured gull-wing doors, advanced aerodynamics, and build quality that rivaled much more expensive supercars. The Imperator was everything the CW311 concept promised to be. Izdera also produced the Spider 033i, a convertible version that was even more exclusive than the coupe. These cars showcased German engineering at its finest, combining Mercedes reliability with exotic car drama. But Schultz's ultimate dream was the Commendatore 112i, a completely new flagship that was intended to inform a Le Mans motorsport program. This car was supposed to be Izdera's breakthrough into the big leagues, competing directly with Ferrari and Lamborghini. Unfortunately, the company lost funding before the Commendatore could reach production. Only one example was ever built, and it recently sold to a private collector. The car occasionally appears at automotive events, serving as a reminder of what might have been. Izdera still exists today, but in a very different form. The company has partnered with Chinese startup WM Motors to develop electric Grand Tourers, a far cry from the Mercedes-powered supercars of the past. These failed supercar manufacturers represent the eternal optimism of the automotive industry. The belief that with enough passion, engineering talent, and determination, anyone can build the perfect car. They were dreamers who refused to accept that supercars could only come from established manufacturers in Italy or Germany. Some failed because they were ahead of their time, like Yamaha with their Formula 1-inspired OX9911. Others failed because they were behind the times, like Vector with their aerospace obsession. Many failed simply because they ran out of money before they could prove their concepts in the marketplace. But their failures weren't meaningless. These companies pushed boundaries, explored new technologies, and created machines that inspired the next generation of automotive engineers. The innovations they developed often found their way into production cars from larger manufacturers, advancing the entire industry. The supercar business is uniquely challenging because it requires enormous investment for tiny production volumes. Customers expect perfection, but they're also incredibly conservative, preferring established brands with proven track records. Breaking into this market requires not just great engineering, but also perfect timing, adequate funding, and a bit of luck. As we move toward an electric future, we can expect to see new companies attempting to break into the supercar market. Some will succeed, like Tesla has with their high-performance electric vehicles. Others will join the long list of beautiful failures, remembered more for their ambition than their achievements. These failed supercar manufacturers remind us that the automotive industry is at its best when it's taking risks, pushing boundaries, and refusing to accept that good enough is actually good enough. They may not have succeeded in the marketplace, but they succeeded in keeping the dream alive. And sometimes, that's more important than sales figures. Whether it's Dome's Space Age Zero, Bizzarrini's beautiful Strada, or Izdera's Mercedes-powered dreams, these cars represent moments when someone believed that automobiles could be more than just transportation. They believed cars could be art, technology, and emotion combined into something greater than the sum of their parts. That belief, even when it leads to commercial failure, is what keeps the automotive industry moving forward. These failed supercar manufacturers may not have built successful businesses, but they built something more important. They built inspiration for the next generation of automotive dreamers. See you in the next video.